Okay, so thank you very much. It was very, very interesting, and I would like to introduce our next presenter from Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution, George Mason University in USA, Professor Dr. Richard Rubinstein. The topic of his lecture is Sources of New Tribalism, Can Human Solidarity Overcome Structural Violence? Please, dear Professor Rubinstein, you with us? I think there is some, okay, maybe there is some kind of problem with the connection.
Maybe we can give the word to Professor Korostelina.
Yes, yes. If yes, maybe we go to Professor Korostelina. If you
yeah, I can do, though I don't see the reach yes in the list.
Yes,
yeah,
I think.
Let me start, and maybe if something after I stopped, I can just call him and find what's going on. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, dear Professor Korostelina. It's from Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution, George Mason University, director of the program of prevention of mass violence. Thank you, first of all, for your help in organizing and promoting our conference. It was, and now, yes, please.
Okay, and let me put time in to be sure that I'm on time. Okay, 15. Is how long we have? 20 or 15?
20 minutes and 5 minutes discussion.
Okay, okay, perfect. Start. Okay, thank you again, and thank you, Benjamin, to organizing it. My heart is so connected to Ukraine, and I'm so glad that several of my colleagues from school, including Dr. Rubinstein, Dr. Rosberg, Dr. Gopin tomorrow, and Antti Ponukanin, who is also now very glad that he's very famous person who done a lot of work on reconciliation also now with our school. So, and I'm really glad to see a lot of my Ukrainian colleagues here. Again, thank you very much for organizing that, and I hope it really will result in multiple projects and multiple opportunities. So I will stress today ideas of which already were really prominent in very many presentations today. It's idea how we deal with identity-based conflict. So reconciliation always happened not after, but within, and I'm really glad to see Martin here again. He always promotes this idea that reconciliation always should happen in the, not only aftermath, but also in the middle of the conflict. So what's happening when this identity-based conflict, they shape social boundary, and reconciliation can help to reshape the social boundary, change it, make more open. It's also reduce threat. We've also seen how reconciliation can create environment where cooperation and peaceful coexistence become very important for the society. And in addition to development of friendship, trust, mutual understanding, and justice, reconciliation is really charged with the formation of common and cross-cutting identities. I will speak about it in a second. So the main thesis which I want to show today is that in societies affected by identity-based conflicts, process of reconciliation embedded in the complex interrelations between power and identities, constant control, constant competition over power, and also redefinition of group identities and social boundaries. So I want to show today how social identity influences process reconciliation through 3 different levels. First, it's impact personal beliefs, norms, and values. Second, it's impact perceptions in intergroup relations and justify social hierarchies. And third, it's legitimize power structures and mobilize collective actions and conflicts. Let me go in each of these particular levels. First, how identity impact beliefs and perceptions. People have a need for positive self-esteem, so they're looking for their group. Is somebody speaking?
General,
mute. Thank you very much. So second is create a.
Oh, look, I never tried that.
1 second, sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
mute.
Yeah.
I just know how to mute everything.
Yes. So maybe there is also a function to mute everyone at the same.
Yeah, you should have as a host function to mute. You can see which microphone is not muted.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But
I
now it
hope.
should be fine. Okay, let's continue.
Okay, thank you very much. So again, as I told, like identity really impact beliefs and perception of the people by just becoming a member of the group. People look for positive self-esteem, which group provides them, then it gives them opportunity to feel better, but they exchange this positive feeling for their loyalty to the group. Also, the more people need security, the more they need a group to protect them, and they exchange their security with the loyalty to the group, so they change their own positions to the group positions. They also participate in social practices and roles prescribed by the group, and these particular norms change how they think. And finally, in many conflicts, group become primacy. So this primacy of a group also impact perceptions. In intergroup relations, we see how there's favorable comparison and out-group derogation, which results from need for positive self-esteem, because people need to compare themselves with others, results in prejudice, discrimination, but we also speak about different level of dehumanization, mechanistic, denial of the human nature attributes, or animalistic, perception of others as animals. We also stress importance of the threat, post-out group boundaries and identities, and people feel that it's not only a threat to their well-being or their existence, but also to their differentiation with the others or their particular values. And one of the very important issues is relative deprivations, and we feel that we have less opportunities, less rights, less accessibility than other groups. And finally, in legitimization of power structure, we see how groups, legitimization of the group depends on internalized values, which we just discussed, and how people accept leader as a, who has rights to influence them. And we also see that processes will legitimize one side and delegitimize completely other side. So what we do, what can we do about it? First, how we address changes in beliefs, norms, and values connected to identities for reconciliation. One of the major processes is creation of the values of tolerance. And I always advocate for Ukraine that I do believe that Ukraine should look into current European liberal society versus 19th century nationalism. Instead of mirroring nationalism of Russia, it's very important to be more tolerant and liberal as current European, if we want to be, if Ukraine want to be European country. Also, these particular values, if they are promotional, will lead to inclusive national narrative, which will emphasize tolerance and increase support of different groups within Ukraine. They will be not feeling that they're excluded from the nation building process, which is a very strong threat to reconciliation. And this inclusion, feeling of inclusion, will lead to participation in specific collective practices, then promote values forgiveness, for example, truth reconciliation committees. And a lot of research in social psychology shows that to change behavior, you really have to change social norms, expectation, rather than attitudes. It works much better in terms of quick and important change in behavior of people. And this change in social norms and collective practices can lead to development of equality and justice in society. And we're speaking about membership of human rights, non-government organizations, social work, and so on. And these activities can and ideally promote national identity that emphasize forgiveness and mercy for all members. But it's strongly connected, as many of participants told, strongly connected with intergroup relations. So how we deal with perception intergroup relations, how we promote reconciliation through intergroup relations. And one of the ways we really need to reduce salience of particular identities and transform dominant identity. One way is increase of personal agencies, as Benjamin was this, your presentation exactly about the increased agency responsibility. We also speak about increased role of civic education, demythologization, destruction of the myths dominant in society, promotion multiplicity of identities, and I specifically will speak about decategorization, cross-categorization, and recategorization. Decategorization, then we move from negative intergroup relations to positive interpersonal relations. So coming from us to them, into me and you. And a lot of people speaking about contact hypothesis, contact theory, then putting people together will reduce conflict. We really have to understand that contact is not enough. And there are a lot of threats to contact, in group loyalty and support, local self-esteem, which help people to understand and compare other groups and see how they can increase their own self-esteem. Re-entry, usually people who went through training, then they re-enter their groups, they are not accepted, and there are a lot of violence towards these people. So power balance, inequality, a lot of these threats should be taken into account. Then when we create particular contact theory-based approaches. Cross-categorization, then we use existing common category or form new common category. Again, between us and them, we create new common ideas. For example, women come together to create new program, youth festivals. We're speaking about like psychologists for social responsibility, Doctor Without Borders groups. So these cross-cutting identities help to create common ground and ideas together. For example, in Crimea, in 90s and early 20s, we done a lot of work to create common cross-cutting identities, where we created youth festivals. We had a lot of support for example, religious leaders who came to come together to deal with divisions in Crimea. Then it was still part of Ukraine officially. Recategorization of common identity, another one. So again, coming from us to them, we can create common identity. One way is to dual identity, where we can common identity, but also people still preserve their own. For example, in the United States, we speak about Italian Americans, Serbian Americans, Ukrainian Americans. Or it could be super categorization, then these particular identities are dissolved and one identity prevail. In social psychology, we call it soup and salad. And there are a lot of research which shows the dual identity, then helping people to still preserve their language, preserve their culture and promote them, actually help to preserve peace much better than super categorization when we blend everyone in one identity. The same as the histories. It's very important to give opportunity for people to have multiple perspective, organistic histories, have dissonant heritage, and not push everyone and accepting one single truth or one single version of the history. Also, identity management, I've done a lot of work on identity-based trainings. And what is important about it, it's what Alexandra forgot the name, about the art. And this is exactly one of the, I see it as a one part of the training. I had it for like 3-4 days, where we explain people for different, very similar exercises, but games and different ways of experiential learning, how multiplicity of identity works, how identity works as a source of conflict, and what are root for tolerance, how we actually can deal with it. And just to show you how this identity-based trainings work better than traditional third-party mediation trainings or even dialogues, you see like on the changes on the top, it's a changes in traditional training, and changes on the down there on the lines, it changes in identity-based training based on multiple trainings. And you see that it's a really identity-based training help people to understand why they think this particular way, how identity function, why they have prejudice and discrimination, why they exclude others, what are mechanism of boundary formation, and a lot of, and they become actually agents of change of the identity. Very, very resonate with a lot of presentation today, that analyzing why I act, why I think, why I dislike others is the key for changing behavior of the people. And one more approach for dealing with intergroup relations is resilience approach. Creating resilience of communities, especially important for IDPs. A lot of people are speaking about IDPs today. There are a lot of critical view on resilience, how it shifts responsibility to local communities and individuals, and may decrease, justify decrease in support of international agents. Or resilience can have negative forms, because people can create negative resilience to conflict and continue. Like this was very great presentation about Colombian case, this negative resilience of a lot of armed groups. But in the same time, we really need to see that it's replace ready-made blueprints, and it's give agency to local people. It's in deep engagement with local resources and practices. It's recognize that local communities have this available skills and knowledge of dealing with crises, dealing with conflict. And it's also built on principle of local ownership, capacity building. So this type of neoliberal approach to governments and collective well-being. And again, I don't have a lot of time to speak about it, but this is the model which I use, and I done research on national resilience in Ukraine, how nation of Ukraine actually developed the idea of resilience to war, being inside of the war. So I analyzed 4 major loops, how structure of conflict is changed by the practices of resilience, but also influence what practices of resilience are developed, what are external resources available there, and how they are included in practices of resilience, but also how these practices change, how external donors think about conflict, change what resources are available. We're also speaking about capacities of the community, like kinship, sense of identity, and cohesion, self-efficacy of community, and how they change for the practices. And finally, dynamics of identity and power, again, how they change, what are microdynamics within the groups, what are subgroups, how leadership is functioning within the community is very important. For example, for Ukraine, in my research, I found one of the important practices of resilience is a dialogue. A lot of very, very positive view on dialogues, even they are not working as expected. And I know a lot of people here, and Tatiana Eskuzelova is here, who done a lot of work on dialogue practices. And another very important practice of resilience in Ukraine was mentioned as a reflective approach to history, which is also understanding lessons learned from the history, dealing with the history, not being afraid to understand multiplicities of interpretation and dealing with them, this difficult heritage of history. And so what are already existing description in literature about this particular approaches? For example, there are research how to develop positive personal identity among members of conflict groups and promote values of caring about others. This is, Benjamin, exactly what you're speaking about in your position. Storytelling exchanges, there are a lot of research on it, emphasis on common feeling, beliefs, and experiences. I, for example, myself consulted Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, working in Kiev, on dialogues within one-on-one, where people tell their own experience, and then they ask if they want to hear experience from person from the other side or across the contact line. And by reading personal experience of the other, they actually, many of them decided to meet with this person. So it's really growing understanding how we create connections across conflict lines. Cross-community contact as a result of integrated education. This is a very important part, especially for IDPs. And we're also speaking about intra-communal sport initiatives, which help to bring people together. Approaches to recategorizations, coexistence model, which emphasize commonality, similarities between the groups. There is a very interesting research done at Zanzibar of three-phase process of developing shared goals, intergroup commonalities, and leadership dialogues and cooperation. We're also speaking about the role of the symbols of common national identity, which represent multiculturalism and unity in spite of diversity, instead of creating one homogeneous vision of the nation. Sport again come very important, and one of research done with one of my former PhD students in Burundi, where we use sport events where people come together to actually create some questions and answers. They have like one of the community activities, and before the event, we're asking questions and answers about different cultures, different multiplicities of identities. And these questions and answers, very, very specifically crafted, help people realize that many divisions and many social boundaries are constructed by leaders to divide them instead of unite them. And it's really had a very strong effect in the result of this multiple events. This PhD student, former PhD student, he was able to sign the agreement between multiple tribes in Burundi. And approaches to group emotions, again, it's a very big problem, and there are perception, humanity are not group members. Forgiveness, it's a huge another topic which hard to discuss here. And delegitimization, again, the last I will speak, it's organistic dialogue, which help explain existing and create new political spaces. Instead of dialogue when we have to come into common understanding, organistic dialogue does not eliminate conflict. It does not require common understanding. It's promote openness to distinct conflict views, development new understanding of social identities and how they function. It's acknowledge dimensions of power and antagonism and their character, and also create functioning of social identities in society as normal process of functioning of democracy. Thank you very much. And I will stop sharing.
Dear Professor Korostelina, there is a very, very important information, and I think a lot of direction that we have, and I saw a lot of direction for research and from activity, and it's great for us, I think, and for our second day. I will take a couple of these things for our project on education and cooperation. Thank you very much. It was very deep and expressing the things in very useful way. That way you can use it in everyday life. Thank you very much. And please, if someone.
There is already a question in the chat.
Yes, we have a question in the chat. It's from Tatiana Kiselova. Would you like to say, Tatiana, or you would I would read it?
If you hear me, because I have bad connection.
Yes, we hear you very well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Korostelina. It's great pleasure to hear you. Hello from Kiev. And the question is, can you elaborate a bit more on this research that found that changing identities into dual identity is actually better than changing identity in something which I think you called super categorization, meaning that it's a melting pot of identities? And also, can you point to the research on that?
Yes, Tatiana, good to see you. No, I could not see you, but good to hear you as always. So just very quickly, there are a lot of research which show that super categorization or melting pot actually create a lot of threats to identity, to social boundary, to distinctiveness. People experience a lot of problems why the identity is not acknowledged. They also experience problem with optimal distinctiveness. So there are a lot of theoretical foundation which shows that preserving some way of cultural identity, language identity, connection to regions, it's very important. And there is it's multicultural concept, but also it's now more developed in a new concept of shared identity or shared society, which I really like. And I don't know how to translate the shared society into Russian and Ukrainian. I was like trying to do it for multiple times. But this idea of shared society is very important. And we share society, we coexist, but at the same time, you not experience threat to your own culture, to your own identity. And I will be happy to point you to more research on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. And can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Yeah, continue on this talk about dual identities. In the context of Ukraine, how feasible you think is this change into dual identity, given that identities in Ukrainian conflict are not stable anyways? I mean, can, let's say, person who is holding pro-Russian political views keep his pro-Russian, so to say, identity and acquire the second identity of kind of pro-European type and hold these two? Or is he or she doomed to lose his pro-Russian identity?
I don't think you put this as a very opposite, depending on how you define Russian identity. If you define Russian identity as a culture and language, then there are a lot of research done in Ukraine which shows that person can be very loyal to Ukrainian nation, but still preserve Russian language and culture. If you speak about loyalty to Russian state as a national identity, then yes, of course, they are in contradiction to each other, but still development of more connection to national identity of Ukraine can reduce salience of connection to Russia as a state. I think it's very important when we speak about Russian identity to see different layers. And also very important for me in understanding of Ukrainian conflict, we should not categorize people singularly into Russians and Ukrainians. So there are so many variations, so many options of interchanging people who speak multiple languages in like even in a family, move from one language to another. There are a lot of people who speak Russian in a family but teach in Ukrainian or speak in Ukrainian others, but they're extremely loyal to Ukrainian nation. They're extremely pro-democratic and European. So then we speak about dual identity. We mean that there are national, but also it could be multiple layers of different layers of identity. We speak about minorities. What about Hungarian minority? What about Crimean Tatars minority? Jewish minority in Ukraine? So they also have to have a space for preservation of their identity, space for respect and acknowledgement. And if they feel that they're respected and acknowledged by Ukrainian society, they will be much more loyal to Ukraine.
May I add a little bit from field research?
Yes, Olga. I don't know, Benjamin, if we're taking time.
Do we have time?
Of course. It's a great to hear a discussion. It's a great people. It's a great so every question, every discussion. So it's good. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to confirm everything Dr. Korostelina mentioned right now.
Thank you.
From field research, yes, because this topic, I call it's not dual identity, but flexible identity.
Yeah.
And this flexible identity I investigate last more than 20 years here in Eastern Ukraine, where two cultures, Russian and Ukrainian culture, interact. So this demand from some discourses, nationalistic discourses in Ukraine, to have pure identity, these demands do not leave room for this flexibility, flexible identity. In Eastern Ukraine, very often people cannot distinguish or cannot identify clearly their culture as Russian or as Ukrainian, because it's mixing culture. It's the same we can say about Western Ukraine. We can see different elements in this identity, socio-cultural identity. So this demand to have pure or true Ukrainian identity is very dangerous demand, which does not allow to create this integrity in Ukrainian society, and especially in terms of reconciliation. This is really a very important issue, very important issue. So I just would like to support this need to talk and to implement these ideas about dual or flexible identity and diverse symbols of diverse national symbols for Ukrainian nation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you very much. If there another person who would love to hear you. Okay, I think it's very promising, this discussion about the identity. It's great to hear that people are not just understand, they are open it and discuss about it. That's just wonderful.